This is the start of the December 10th, the Board of Directors meeting of the College of Patent Agents and Trademark Agents. I don't know if we have any guests, but we have a full complement of board members, and we're joined by Daryl Pink and our able CEO staff and support. So without further ado, I think we should try to
Mr. Chair, but I don't see Karima.
Is Karima not here yet?
I don't see her on the screen as yet. I would hate to move ahead.
I'm sorry. We should. Thank you, Doug. We'll wait for her to join, and then we'll get underway. I hope she has the link. I did wonder whether she'd received the link. If you maybe she.
I resent
to her
the link
today.
to her.
Thank you very much.
I'll shoot Karima a quick text.
Thank you.
Karima just says she doesn't have the other link. Andres, can you send it to her again, please?
I sent it 10 seconds ago.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, while we're waiting, can I just ask Daryl a question? I notice our privacy policy makes reference to fingerprints and blood type, and I'm wondering whether that is really necessary.
Pardon me?
Our privacy policy has a reference to fingerprints and blood type, and I just thought that was an odd reference.
I think it's just an example of we would never have fingerprints or blood types. I think it's probably just a standard inclusion. I didn't notice that, Doug, when I read it several times.
If you could look at that, because it does sound a little draconian, that's all. Okay.
All right, we're joined by Karima now. Welcome, Karima. You were able to get on.
Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. So we now have a full complement of the board. So we'll start with the first item on the agenda. Welcome everybody. We've got a pretty full agenda, so I'm not planning to make any introductory remarks, but thanks again to everyone for joining us on a Friday evening or afternoon, wherever you happen to be. It's not the ideal time for a board meeting, especially a board meeting with the kind of agenda that we have to try to get through today. So I do appreciate the effort that everybody's making to hold off just for a little while before starting on your Friday afternoon cocktail, if that's what you're into on a Friday evening. Let's try to work through the agenda as quickly and as efficiently as we can. And of course, on the first matter that we have on the agenda is just the usual question that no board member has indicated that prior to the meeting that they have any conflict of interest with respect to any of the matters on the agenda. And I simply want to confirm here in the public meeting that unless somebody speaks up now, we'll assume that nobody wishes to declare any conflicts. Okay. Second item on the agenda is our consent agenda, and on the consent agenda today we have 3 items: the minutes of October 30th, 2021, the amendment to board policy number 7, which deals with nominations and elections, and the CEO's report. I hope you've had a chance to review those documents, and we are seeking by approval of those matters on the consent agenda, that those matters be approved without further debate or discussion. Is anybody that wishes to take any of those matters off the consent agenda and put it on the regular agenda? No? Okay. Hearing no request to do that, could I ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda then? Doug is moving, seconded by Ruth McHugh. All in favor? Okay, seeing no opposition, that the consent agenda is approved. Moving on to item 3 on our, again, this is a recurring item on our agenda, starting with respect, these are items on our agenda with respect to the establishment of the college. We're still, of course, in our early days. So we have committees to populate and policies to approve, and 2 items that we have under that rubric then is item 3.1. And I'm going to ask Victoria Reese to introduce and discuss these 2 matters for approval, being the Discipline Committee Skills Matrix and the appointment of candidates nominated for the Discipline Committee.
Thank you,
Victoria?
Mr. Chair. Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Reese, the Manager of Professional Responsibility with CPATA. And I'm pleased to be bringing forward a slate of candidates to populate the new Discipline Committee. The board looked a few months ago at the terms of reference for the Investigations Committee and the Discipline Committee, and those were approved. The Investigations Committee has been well underway with its work since August, and it's now time to move forward with appointment of the Discipline Committee and the skills matrix that is used for populating the Discipline Committees. So the responsibilities of the Discipline Committee are to hear applications from the Investigations Committee in relation to charges against members, licensees with respect to violations of code of conduct, practice standards, the act and regulations, and so on. And the committee is also responsible for creating its own procedural toolkit to recommend revisions and to create, develop policies and procedures as needed to support an adjudications process that's fair, effective, transparent, consistent, and accountable. And so important to that process is a skills matrix, which helps to identify the knowledge, skills, attributes, and experience needed by both the individuals on the committee as well as the committee as a whole. And so the skills matrix that's put today for approval sets out, particularly on pages 3 and 4, the particular knowledge, skills, experience, and attributes that are recommended for members collectively of the Discipline Committee. And these are primarily derived from the Federation of Law Societies adjudicator training curriculum and are supported by different professional regulation bodies as being the appropriate skills and so on. And so I'm asking that the board resolve to approve the skills matrix, noting that there are 2 additions at the bottom of the skills and experience. We've added bilingual and ability to conduct hearings in both official languages. That was always the intention. I just forgot to put it at on this memo.
Okay. I'll open it up for discussion now. So we're being asked to approve the draft skills matrix for the discipline, for membership on the Discipline Committee. So, and you've had a chance to review the draft that's in the agenda. Any comments or concerns or questions for Victoria before we consider a motion?
I would like to just
Yes.
just make a comment, Mr. Chair, to just say kudos to you, Victoria. Honestly, I don't know how you do this. You must have the most amazing network because you consistently bring forward just remarkable slates of candidates. So thank you so much for doing all of that work on our behalf. And you've done it again.
We're going to come to the candidates in a minute. We're just doing,
Yep.
I think we're just doing the Discipline Committee at the moment.
Yep. I'm just bringing forward to Victoria just the great work that she's done, and I'm establishing that Victoria has tremendous expertise and reach in this area. So we're very lucky to have you collaborating with us on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Ruth.
Okay, well, thank you. Anything else? Yes, Doug.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the matrix and we'll get on to the candidates. Okay.
Thank you very much. Seconded by whom? Who's got
Karima.
Karima, thank you very much. All in favor? Okay, seeing No one opposed. That the policy is approved. And that's carried. Now, Victoria, could you turn to the slate of candidates that are being proposed for appointment to the Discipline Committee, please?
Well, Ruth let the cat out of the bag. It's a
Yes.
wonderful collection of individuals, and what we're particularly pleased is that we put out a notice seeking expressions of interest from our licensees and got a very strong response. So strong that unfortunately we can't place everyone who's expressed an interest on the committee at this time. But obviously we'll be exploring what other areas their volunteerism could be of value to CPATA, and we thank everybody for their interest. And so in addition to the strong response from qualified licensees, we looked across Canada at non-licensee candidates. I conducted interviews with a short list of licensees and non-licensees, and I'm bringing forward a slate of 7 candidates at this time. It's important that this group, and they do, be able to conduct proceedings in both official languages. There must be subject experts. They must be geographically and demographically diverse, have experience with a wide range of employment environments in which licensees work, and possess excellent skills, knowledge, and judgment in relation to serving on adjudicative tribunals. They must have a strong work ethic, professionalism, be respected by their peers, be culturally competent, able to conduct themselves with appropriate decorum and in a fair-minded and balanced way. And so I'm very confident that this team, this slate, will fulfill all of those requirements. And so the 7 who are being brought forward, I'll present them in alphabetical order. The first one is Raj Anand. He's a lawyer in Ontario. Practices in administrative law, human rights, constitution, labor relations, civil litigation, professional negligence, and discipline. Has extensive experience conducting hearings in both official languages with the Law Society of Ontario appeals, hearing and appeals tribunals. And he's served on boards of inquiry, has extensive decision writing experience, and has served on the board of directors for Legal Aid Ontario, as well as on the board of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And I think that he's very interested in committing time and effort to this. Charles Boulakia practices intellectual property law since his admission in 2000 with the IP firm of Rideout and Mabey in Toronto. He's a Law Society of Ontario lawyer, as well as a patent agent and trademark agent, and is fully licensed to practice patent and agency work before the USPTO. He is fully bilingual, and he currently serves as his firm's equity, diversity, and inclusion officer, as well as its risk management practice, management partner. Kathleen Lickers is a sole practitioner lawyer with the Six Nations of the Grand River since 2003, and she practices primarily Indigenous law with boards of inquiry, complex dispute resolution, legal and commission counsel to the Indian Claims Commission, and a federal commission of inquiry, as well as litigation. She is an adjudicator with the Law Society of Ontario, and also previously served on the Law Society of Ontario's review panel on regulatory and hearing processes affecting Indigenous peoples. And she identifies as a Seneca of the Six Nations of the Grand River and has been recognized extensively for her commitment to and efforts for the Indigenous community. Marcel Mongeon is a lawyer in Hamilton, admitted in 1983, and he's employed with a small law firm of his own. He also operates Mongeon Consulting, which provides technical and business leadership support and education, remote hearings, and corporate governance. And in particular, his experience in assisting with virtual and remote hearings will be of tremendous value to CPATA. He currently practices as a registered patent and trademark agent and supports a small number of clients in technology matters. He was a member of the Barreau de Quebec and is a member of the New York State Bar. He's fully bilingual, as well as being able to speak Spanish and German. And he serves as deputy judge in the Hamilton Small Claims Court. Jay Sengupta is a non-practicing lawyer, a recently non-practicing lawyer in Hamilton, Ontario, admitted to the Ontario Bar in 1991. She's a mediator, investigator, and member of the Human Rights Adjudication Panel in the Northwest Territories. She also serves on the Law Society of Ontario's Hearing Tribunal. And she served as Human Rights Commissioner with the Peel District School Board and as well as senior counsel with the Office of the Ombudsman of Ontario, and for 10 years as the full-time vice chair of the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal. She has extensive experience with adjudicative decision-making and writing. Our sixth candidate is Jean Whitto QC, who's a practicing lawyer in Vancouver, BC with Sugden, McPhee and Ross. Her areas of practice have been focused on administrative law, professional regulation, prosecution and defense of regulated professionals, policy and procedure development, health law, securities law, adjudicative training, and counsel to panels and tribunals. So she will provide an excellent support as the discipline committee begins to develop its own policies and procedures. And finally, Benoit Yelly, who is a patent agent and engineer and a partner with Gowlings in Montreal. He became a patent agent 20 years ago. He's fully bilingual, and his background is computer engineering, information technology, telecommunications, and medical devices. And he has been and continues to be responsible for supervising the agent trainees in his firm. And so that is the slate of 7 who we are proposing be appointed to the discipline committee. And in addition, we're recommending that Mr. Marcel Mongeon be appointed as the discipline committee chair, particularly given his ability to conduct proceedings in both official languages and his extensive experience in chairing administrative tribunals and decision writing.
Thank you, Victoria. I'll open it up now for discussions, questions on the proposed candidates, if any. Any discussion, any questions? No? Jeff?
No, I was just going to second Ruth's comments prior to the listing of the actual individuals. I think it's a great list of people, and it's a lot of great work that's been done by Victoria and her team to get this up to us.
Yeah, I think I'm probably reflecting the collective opinion of the board when I say it's an embarrassment of riches to have had these candidates step up and want to take these positions on. I know 2 of the candidates personally, and have seen their work as adjudicators, and I can certainly, for what it's worth, vouch for their excellence, both in terms of their individual skills and just as fair-minded people. So very delighted with the response. So I think we're ready to put the motion on the table. Can I have someone move the motion, please? Jeff, I think, is moving the motion. Seconded by let's say Ruth is seconding it. So all in favor? Okay, seeing no opposition, that the board approves the appointment of those individuals to the discipline committee. And if you will pass on the thanks of the board for to these candidates for accepting the positions. We're very delighted that they've agreed to serve the college in this capacity. So thank you very much. Okay, next is an appointment to the registrar's commit to the registration committee, and I'm going to ask Jennifer Slobodkin to address this if I could.
Jen is in another meeting, so I'll speak to this briefly.
Oh, you're going to speak to it. Okay, thank you, Daryl.
So this committee is now up and operating. We have 2 positions left to fill on the committee under its terms of reference, 1 trademark agent and 1 patent agent. And we went looking for a trademark agent who has both small firm and some large firm experience, more than 5 years in the profession, and is a woman. I had an chance to engage with Heidi Jensen, who runs a small firm in Ottawa as a trademark agency. And we approached her. She agreed to put her name forward, and I'm pleased to recommend to the board the appointment of Heidi Jensen of Ottawa as a member of the registration committee.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. Opening it up again for any discussion from members of the board. Looks like she's more than acceptable to the board from what I'm seeing. So could I have a motion to approve that appointment? Thank you, Doug, and seconded by Jeff. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Approved with without any dissent. All right. Now, thank you very much for that. We're moving on to the next usual item on our agenda, which is building a model regulator. No, sorry. So I'm sorry, we're not. We have to deal with item 3.4, which is the introduction of the board governance policy, policy number 8.
Can we do
And-
3.3 first, Tom?
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Thank you. 3.3. Yes, I'm getting way ahead of myself. I'm sorry. 3.3, the Board of Directors Skills Matrix. You want to deal with that? And then we'll deal with the board policy governance, the board governance policy right after that. So we can deal with those two items.
So I'll introduce this, and although it shows us for approval, it really is an iterative process. We've developed skills matrices using a common approach across the organization. So we've tried to build a set of requirements, attributes, and skills in each of our key regulatory roles. So as the board knows, because we've talked about it previously, we're at the process of beginning to look at recruiting the permanent board under the Act. So that's a board that will be made up of 4 elected licensees, 2 patent agents and 2 trademark agents, and 5 appointed by the minister. As the board discussed at our last meeting and following that meeting, I've communicated with the minister's office, and we've begun discussions with the minister's office about the process for appointment of the board, and have suggested that that process must be done in an open and transparent way. And we believe as a matter of principle that an independent regulator should be responsible for that as an independent regulator, we should have a responsibility for the appointment and succession of the board. And of course, succession is a key board responsibility. So we're engaging and continuing to engage in those discussions, but crucial to the discussion and how we recruit board members and what we ask of elected board members is the adoption of a skills matrix. So I developed this based, as I said, on the work we've done in other skills matrices. We are using the Boyden firm to assist us in recruiting a couple of our committees as the board approved at our last meeting, and I've worked with Boyden and have their input that's incorporated into this document. So it's open for beginning discussion of the board. I think it is a key document that we will need to have for both purposes, both the election and the recruitment process.
Okay. Discussion? Approval?
I've got a few questions,
Please go
Daryl, if
ahead.
I may.
Yes,
Thanks.
please.
So one is just a housekeeping question. I found it hard to read because I am used to reading from left to right across a page. So as I was doing that, I was realizing at one point where it said under knowledge that a person should have legal knowledge as a senior lawyer, and I'm like, what? We want only lawyers on this board? But then I realized you have to read a column up and down. So anyway, just throwing it out there that if we're going to be making this sort of a public document for Boyden and others to use, we might want to think about the format. But here's my question on one of the items you've got in here, Daryl. It's under experience. It's the first white box under experience where it says service on the board of a regulator, community, or NFP board, preferably with
not for profit.
Yep. Preferably with experience as a committee chair. My question is, what do you mean by a community board? And why have we excluded corporate, public, and private boards?
I don't think we've excluded them, but I think I put that forward because I wanted to keep the focus, at least experience with public interest boards or public-based boards. So that's why I use that language. I might not have it quite right.
Yeah, I would expand it to because by listing just community boards, which I don't know what that means. and not-for-profit boards, we wouldn't want to exclude people who have really great corporate, public and private board experiences, because many huge public and private organizations have a real social purpose mandate. So there's great experience there. So I just feel like either take out community and not-for-profit, or widen it by saying we would also consider people with corporate and private board experience. That was one question I have. I do have another, but I'll wait till others have a chance to weigh in.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how everybody else feels about it, but that seems very sensible, that you wouldn't want to restrict your corporate governance experience to just people who have experience on public boards or regulators. So yeah, that does make sense to me. Okay, did you, Ruth, I wondered though if you wanted to deal with your second point, and then we can move on. If
Up to you. Yeah, I've got another.
Yeah, then we can
sure.
move on if everybody else wants to jump in and add
Yep.
anything or.
Okay, I just have another suggestion under I'm going to the top to see this column, under the knowledge column, where we're talking about, all of the knowledge that we'd like people to have. I'd suggest we add CSG knowledge, because that's very important today and going forward. So I would add that.
CSG is that different from CSR?
It is the newer way of saying CSR, right?
And so what's the G stand for?
Governance. Yeah,
Okay.
so instead of corporate social responsibility, it's corporate and social and governance. So just CSG that's all. I would just think that we might want to add that, because it's really important in a board that is serving the public interest to understand that social purpose behind what we're doing. So.
Great points. Jeff, yes, please.
Just to speak to Ruth's very first point on the readability of this table, if we can eliminate acronyms and actually spell things out, that'd be helpful. And maybe for the swim lanes, to make this more readable, is maybe just give them like a common color down each column, and then it would make sense when you cross a page as to what you're looking at.
So, I didn't, when I prepared this, I didn't have the benefit of a communications person, which I now do, and some graphics expertise. So and I hadn't asked Donna to look at this yet. So I promise you, the next time you see it, it'll be, as with most of our branded materials, they'll look much better.
Well, I think we probably descended about as far as we want to down into, operational details for this meeting as we want to go. Unless anybody wants to comment on commas or semicolons before we move on. No, okay.
Well, I'm sure we will. I'm sure the document will be edited. There are a couple of spelling errors in it, so we will get that edited. Yeah.
This is why we've got all these eyeballs looking at this stuff. So, so Ruth, your comments will take on board, and I think Jeff's made some useful comments as well on formatting to make it more readable. So, is there anything else that we need to deal with on this particular matter now? We're going to be.
So I'll massage this. I'll share it with the board, and we'll bring it back at our next meeting.
Okay, and hopefully we'll have it pretty close to approval for next meeting then, with those changes made.
Okay. If we'd like to move this forward, because Daryl, if for any reason on Daryl's agenda we want to move this forward, these are very minor changes,
yes,
and I would sure be comfortable with either approving now based on these acceptance of these changes, or approving by email later. Just don't want to hold Daryl up.
Yeah. So Daryl, how would you like us to deal with this? Would you like us to deal with it? We'll give it approval subject to your.
Let us clean it up,
changes.
and then maybe let's let the minutes show that we'll have an email approval.
Okay, great. All right, so that's how we're going to deal with that. Thank you.
So the next document, Tom, the next item relates to rounding out some of our governance policies.
Mm-hmm.
And these are issues which the board had raised going way back into our development time and our early time together. So I put together in one place what I thought was at least an attempt to reduce some of that thinking to writing. So, and this is a very early draft. We haven't had a chance to talk about any of this, so I wanted to introduce it to the board to get their feedback, both about the content, the approach, and then we'll determine how it goes forward.
Well, Daryl, as you know, you have a board full of policy wonks and nerds, so I'm sure, and governance wonks and nerds, so I'm sure you're going to get some significant feedback on this. But do you have any specific comments you want to make about the policy, other than it's been sort of, we've just put everything, our discussions in one place? But
no, I did notice today again a couple of those. There's a couple of items that are repeated that needs to be cleaned up.
okay.
And it's based on my experience, but I really defer to the board. And I did try to kind of capture some of our early discussions about minutes and what happens in camera, that sort of thing. But it's again open for complete dissection and rebuilding.
All right, so can we get some initial feedback on this this draft from the board? Anybody want to go first? Comments, Ruth?
I think it looks good.
Oh,
Yeah, I like it.
Ruth likes it. Great. Okay. Anything else? Maybe I'm totally wrong here, but maybe you have collected everyone's thoughts and put them in one place. So, Karima, did you want to bring your wealth of experience sitting on boards?
Yeah, no, I just had some nits, but I can take them offline. There's nothing substantive. I thought in principle, there was a couple of areas that just seemed to have some inconsistencies, but I don't think they were material enough to warrant a substantive discussion.
You'll send them to me, Karima?
Yeah, I'll connect with
Okay.
you later, Darryl.
Anything else?
Daryl, I'll send you just a couple of small things too. For example, sometimes we refer to council rather than board. So just a couple of little things I can send to you as well. But in principle, I think you've nailed it. So thank you.
Well, then I guess I struck out on that prediction. Thanks very much. Okay, Jeff, yes.
Just one question. If in this package that we're approving, are we including the memo on the committee recruitment process? I don't know if my numbering of pages is correct, but I think we're on topic 3.4 right now.
Yes, that's right. We're moving on to the next
So
heading.
4.1 starts at 57. So there's a memo on pages 54 through 56. And I just had a question on one of the paragraphs. It talks about the directors should consider individual interest in committee appointments on an interim basis from March to May annual meeting. Is that part of this topic, or is that part of our next topic?
It's the next topic, Jeff.
Okay, so the next topic really starts at page 54, then, not 57. So I'm
Yes.
fine with everything above 54
Okay.
that we're talking about here.
Yes. Committee recruitment process starts at 54. You're right. Not 57.
So are we
Page 50.
going to be talking about the committee recruitment process or not? That's not clear.
Well, we are, but we're still we're not there yet. We're still
Okay,
at
gotcha.
3.4.
Fair enough.
So
Okay.
this was originally on the agenda for discussion, but it appears that we're quite prepared to approve it, subject to these what I gather will be editorial changes proposed by Ruth and Karima, nitpicks, I guess. So would you like to approve this now, or do you want to bring back a final cleaned up copy?
My preference would be to bring it back, Tom.
Okay.
Just a couple things. We're working. I mentioned we're working on branding.
Yes.
So this will give us an opportunity to work this through our new process for publication, review, that sort of thing. So there's no urgency to this. We're pretty much in compliance with this now. It can wait till our January meeting.
Everybody's okay with that? I think that's fine. So we'll defer that. You can bring it back when it's ready for approval then. Okay, great. So building a model regulator. The next item on the agenda is recruitment of committees and board of directors. And this again is an item that we're going to have Daryl introduce for discussion.
So we agreed at the last meeting to retain Boyden to assist us with the recruitment process. I have done that, and that work has started. And there's a variety of, and you have the schedule before you. And they're recruiting 2 committees, the Governance and Nominating Committee and the Risk and Audit Committee. But key to all of these committees is that the board needs to have a discussion in due course about the roles that individual members of the board play. For example, I think we've agreed that the governance committee, and you'll recall that under our structure, the nominating committee is in effect a subcommittee of the governance committee. But the governance committee is primarily a board committee. It's led by the board, and it's the opportunity for some members of the board to really delve into the operations at the governance level. And so I think we're going to be in a transition stage until we increase the size of the board to 9. But I think we need to have some kind of real leadership from the board on the governance issue. And the same is true with the Risk and Audit Committee. 1 member of the board is slated to serve on that committee. The terms of reference call for a 3-person committee, of which 1 is a member of the board. So that's the piece that that Jeff alluded to. It is about what process we go through for appointment of committees where members of the board are involved. And we've not had that discussion before because we haven't had any committees. And there are a variety of ways and organizations in which this is done. My personal preference is that the board appoints committees. And that it has an opportunity as opposed to the chair. And there are some organizations in which the chair appoints committees. But I think that's the discussion that the board has to have. And then we have to talk through what's the process by which individual members of the board express their interest, identify what it is they would like to do, articulate the skills, how they fit into the skills matrix for these committees. And we do that in an appropriate way. So we've already, as somewhat of a policy, said that kind of discussions about people are done in private, and I think that's appropriate. So I'm not suggesting the board has all of this discussion in a public meeting, but I think it needs to take place in a way in which people have an opportunity to do it. So there are a couple of approaches. One is we have an in-camera meeting in which this happens. Another approach is that the chair has one-on-one discussions with individual members of the board to canvass their interest. So just throw that out because it's important that we advance this work. Boyden will start its process early. The advertising will start shortly, and they'll start to have some candidates early in the new year. And the second piece of this discussion is who will participate from the board in the selection process. Because we will go through a fairly rigorous selection process, including interviews, and we will need people to participate with our headhunter. And then the question is whether the CEO has a role in that as well. And I throw that open for discussion. There are organizations that go both ways.
A lot to chew on there. Okay, anybody have some thoughts that they want to share on the committee recruitment process?
Well, I think that what Daryl has outlined makes good sense in that the board needs to be canvassed for its interest in serving. Each individual on the board needs to be canvassed for their interest in serving on these committees. In other organizations that I've led, that conversation is had either with the board chair or with the governance chair. As far as Daryl's comment about individuals should, then articulate how their skills and experience align with the skills matrix of that particular organization. And I think that's a relatively easy exercise to do. If we create the skills matrix in a format that board members can go in and fill in. So board members should do a self-assessment on a skills matrix. In my view, for we should start with, when we approve our board skills matrix, each board member should self-assess against that skills matrix. And once that's done, the governance and nominating committee, which I know we don't have yet, would then be able to go through that and understand implicitly who is actually really well suited for each of these committees within the board. So I think we're such a small group right now that if we were to just get a board skills matrix that we all agree to, do a self-assessment, send it in, I think we're, it's going to be relatively straightforward, and quite likely my guess is that any of us would be qualified to serve on any of the committees. So then it would be a matter of who has the desire and capacity to play what role. So that's my thought. In other boards that I've served, once the candidates have self-identified, if you will, generally it's been a board vote. That is, the committees are appointed by the board. And I feel strongly that the committee should be appointed by the board, not by the board chair, but by the whole board, and that be done, by way of a vote at a board meeting. So that's what I've seen work well.
Okay, good. That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
And to add to that, I mean, the last question or the last point that Daryl raised was whether the CEO should participate in this as well. I think that the closeness of working on the various issues, both with the committees and the people that are, the work of those committees, it seems to me that the CEO's assistance would be invaluable in working through all of this. I don't know why we would not want the CEO to be involved in that work.
Well, if I may, I think for sure the CEO or management should be involved in the work of determining who, of corralling or being the custodians of or the recipients of that board skills matrix, to understand where all the current members are on the skills matrix, to also identify, this is going forward, of course, when terms are up, so that the board can have an evergreen process for self-renewal. Yes, it would be really good for management to be involved in that, but I think in terms of actually appointing board members to committees, that should be done by the board and not with no involvement of the CEO, is my view. The CEO wouldn't have a vote in who serves on which committees. And
that's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, good.
So so in terms of the work that Boyden is doing with us, the CEO would participate in the interview panel.
That makes sense to me, Daryl. That certainly makes sense.
Yeah, obviously, yes, I think ultimately, I think the board would approve the candidates that come forward, right? I mean, that's where the CEO's participation would be basically being the voice of the CEO and senior management on the needs of the committees, right?
Well, when you say the board would approve candidates being brought forward, I just want to clarify. The board would approve the recommended candidate.
Yes, that's
right. Yeah. So I guess
to put it even more technically correct, I think it's the board would approve the appointments.
Yes.
Right? To the committees.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed. So I think that it would be a good idea to begin with that work of, let's do a board skills matrix and a self-assessment, and let's decide which of the current members of the board want to serve on these two committees, because those board members, so let's say a current board member wants to put themselves forward as chair of the governance committee, for example, then that person should be in on the interviews for members of the governance committee. Same thing with the risk committee. Those board members who have self-identified as wanting to serve on the committees, I think would be logical choices to be in on the interviews with Boyden. That sort of makes sense to me. One thing I'm not clear on though is I understand why we've got Boyden recruiting for members of the Audit and Risk Committee. That makes perfect sense to me because we will have external members there. But given that we said the Governance Committee is generally a committee of the board, are we still wanting to recruit other members, non-board members to the Governance Committee? If so, I've just never seen that happen before. So I think curious.
It's a small minority of the governance. So we'd have some outside people on the Governance Committee, let's say one, maybe two, depending on the size, and the Nominating Committee. So it's also to recruit for the Nominating Committee.
Yes. That for sure, I agree with the Nominating Committee. I just have never seen. I've seen public members, on boards being part of the governance, but I've never seen a board recruit for an external member of its Governance Committee, given that the Governance Committee is responsible for how the board conducts itself, so to speak. So that's all.
Kariba?
Yeah, and I would share Ruth's observation. I think it was one of the things that struck me when I read the materials was the fact that I haven't seen that, where on a governance committee, you'd have an external board, like external to the board, a member there. And so that was the only one.
I didn't put the terms of reference in the package. I probably should have, because I think on the terms of reference, we said the governance committee will be 5 people, 4 of whom are board members.
And I think my inclination would be that it should all be board members, but
yeah, that's my gut feel as well.
Well, except it does give you that opportunity for some outside expertise, which we may not have,
It does, but all of our committees have the ability to bring in external expertise. So I chair a governance committee of another regulator, just not to be named, but we did bring in an external expert to do a governance review. We wanted to do a governance policy review, a review of our we wanted to have a governance review. So we brought in expertise for that. There have been a couple of different policies where when we've had the governance committee deliberation on them, we've brought subject matter experts in, but I'm not in favor of actually appointing an external party to be a member of the governance committee.
So I think there's a practical problem in terms of what the numbers will be, because this will be a 9-member board. Will you have the skills of a majority of the board, 5 if that's the ultimate number, to do this work?
Again, I'm just drawing from personal experience, being of another regulator with a 9-member board, and there are 4 board members on the governance committee, one of whom is the chair, and the other 3 are members. And that seems to be, if you've got a 9-person board, I don't know that you need a 5-person governance committee. Just, I don't know.
Could I ask an information question more than anything, because I'm not really understanding in my own mind what the significance of this debate is. Why is it important to on the one hand have somebody who's external to the board sitting on the governance committee, and why is it important that we not have somebody external? I mean, I'm not really understanding why we're having this discussion. Why it's such? What's the point here?
I think the reason we're having the discussion is because in our board materials, it was suggested that we move ahead immediately with having Boyden recruit an external member of the governance committee.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of board members, Tom, who are saying we don't believe we should have an external member of the governance committee.
I get that.
So I think that's why we're having the discussion.
No, yeah, and I'm just trying to understand. I'm just trying to understand why. I'm just understanding the pros and cons of having an external member. Because I don't understand. I mean, I wouldn't intrinsically. I wouldn't have instinctively thought we needed an external appointment. But I don't really know what the stakes are in whether we have one or not. I'm just trying to understand what the governance issue is here.
So let me suggest we didn't look at this when we looked at the terms of reference. So let's bring the terms of reference back and have that discussion with the document in front of us. And Boyden will not be so far down the road with its process that we can't do what we need to do.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea, Daryl. And you made the excellent point that any work Boyden has potentially already done on this is fine, because we do want external parties on the nominating committee, which is a subcommittee of the governance committee.
Yeah.
So I feel that that's where you want that external influence. I do believe that the governance committee will from time to time want to bring in specific expertise on specific matters, absolutely. But I don't believe that there should be an external person recruited to serve on the governance committee, particularly when we look at the board skills matrix that we're identifying here. Members of this board will have good, solid governance experience. So you're going to already have all of that experience already. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Well, anyway, I think what we've got a plan, because Ruth, you've raised a question that I think we all agree needs further consideration. So we're going to bring that back for further discussion.
So my takeaway is I will, when we finalize the skills matrix, I will put it into a format that allows for self-evaluation of people individually. I will compile that for the board because it needs to be shared. I'll also provide to the board the skills matrices for the two committees that for which we're looking for members. I don't think that you need to go through the self-evaluation process for them as well, but they can be that can influence your ultimate selection, and we'll leave for some room for notes or something like that. So that people begin to identify what it is they would like to do for sharing with their colleagues on the board.
That sounds really good, Daryl. And what I would ask that you consider, because I've found this to be very helpful on other boards, is when you're completing a skills matrix and it says you know something about I have experience, I have a lot of experience, I have a ton of experience. When you're kind of trying to qualify or quantify the amount of experience, that we actually state something to the effect of 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 plus years, so that we're all on the same board, on the same page. And if I say I have expertise in an area, to me, that means I've got more than 10 years experience in it. But the person beside me might think expertise means 3 years. So, it would be good to give us some parameters so that we're comparing apples to apples, if you will. Mr. Chair, I have another question on the board recruitment
Go ahead.
process, and I'm just not, so it was this piece, Daryl, you had said, we proposed to engage Boyden to assist with the process. We had envisioned the college and ISED would jointly instruct Boyden, review candidates. So you're wanting the minister's office to be part of the candidate interview process, and then we would put forward names from which the minister would choose. And in there you say, I understand this might be like how the board of the patent collective was chosen. And I just wanted to clarify that that's not the case. I was not appointed to the patent board. I was actually elected at the AGM. I was elected by the members with a capital M being basically the board. So it was the board who appointed me, not the minister. So I was not a ministerial appointment. But I think in our act, the minister does have to appoint the board. Is that correct? I'm not sure.
So you're looking at the memo that I wrote to the senior officials in Industry Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was beginning a discussion with them in which I tried to represent the board's views that the board should be intimately involved in the recruitment and making recommendations to the
Yeah.
minister for appointments. 5 of the board members will be appointed by the minister.
Gotcha. That was what I wasn't clear on. Okay.
So we're not close yet to an agreement, although I do have a meeting with some senior officials next week in which this is on the agenda.
Okay. Okay. So I have heard and have experienced on other boards that rely on ministerial appointments that it can be quite problematic to a board if the ministry is behind on making those appointments. In fact, I believe that the Auditor General of Alberta did a really good performance audit report on just that, because there were boards that literally couldn't make quorum because they didn't have their full board appointed. And so, you know, that's a drastic case. And I'm not saying that that's widespread in Alberta, and certainly, you know, not so much anymore, but governments get very busy, ministries get very busy. So that's kind of a risk we need to face. So I just wanted to point that out for you when you're having those discussions.
But remember that the legislation does address that in part because all terms only expire when the successor is appointed.
Perfect. Yeah,
so we
perfect.
don't end up with a no
So we would
quorum.
never be out of quorum. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Daryl. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Okay, anything else from the board before we move on? Okay, Daryl, we've got a plan there. So the next matter on the agenda is the proposed draft 2022, I think, yes, 2022-2023 operation plan. Do you want to address this, Daryl, introduce this subject?
So working with Don Thompson and Alan Feinblit after our work in Ottawa, in late October, I put together this document and then had input from all our staff with respect to items that fall under their individual portfolios. So the first part, the stage 1 part, is setting up the college. Much of that work is done, and there are some fine-tuning things that still have to happen, but we're largely in sync with much of that work, or it's ongoing now. So we've dealt with elections already today in terms of our policy and things like that. There is another piece, though, that is in blue. It's on page 62 that we didn't talk about specifically at the meeting, but I wanted to just add it to the agenda or add it to the list because it's a really key part of my work and our staff's work, which is the regulatory policy development, which needs to be ongoing. So, for example, we now have gone through a cycle of the exams. We've gone through a cycle of registration. We've gone through a renewal process. There will be some policies that we need to do. The most common question we've been asked, regulatory question, is if I become a Class 2 licensee, what is the policy or process to revert to a Class 1 licensee? And we've said to people, we don't have a policy yet, and we've identified the process by which we will develop that policy. It'll be an open consultative process, and we'll start working on that. But it's a key. We just didn't have to get to it yet because it won't kick into effect until next year. And Victoria alluded earlier when she spoke about the authority of the Discipline Committee. The Discipline Committee is empowered under the Act to develop its own policies. And so we'll have to work with the Discipline Committee to do that. So that is something we didn't talk about, but it's really key to our ongoing work. The next, and each of the other items that are there are, as I said, are things in progress. So I'll just pick the very last one, which is the annual report. So we know that we have to produce an annual report for the 31st of March. that the annual report has to contain our financial statements. So we've appointed an auditor. Our engagement with the auditor is such that we will have financial statements ready for the board's approval in time for them to be published in our annual report. We've also had discussions, and this goes back many, many months with Industry Canada about items that they would like to see in the annual report based on other reports that are produced by entities that are tabled in Parliament. And that's the process that our annual report will go through. So we're working to make sure that we provide or include in the annual report items that the department would like to see. That doesn't limit us to those items, but we'll certainly want to make sure we cover them off. So that is all happening. And then there is a question about the board's specific communications that are included in the annual report, because I believe our report, based on discussions that we've had, there are a number of messages, there are a number of things that this board has said on several occasions that it wishes to make sure are part of our formal reporting through to the minister, government, parliament. So that's the first piece, and that's a chunk of work, as I said, all of which is ongoing. The second piece is design and develop the regulatory program consistent with our regulatory objectives, standards, and principles. So there are a number of initiatives that are identified here that are ongoing. And by far the most significant one, and even since this document was prepared, we've done a lot more work, relates to the whole registration process, the competencies that we identify, what's the nature of the training that we undertake, what do our exams look like eventually. And we could have and should ultimately have a lengthy discussion about what are this organization's priorities for the profession. And the way we, in terms of our role as a regulator, and how do we ensure the public interest is met. So this is a Daryl Pink philosophy, not one that I have exclusively, many share this, but I think the issue of credentialing new licensees, setting standards of expectation for them is by far the most important thing that we do. You know, many regulators say, well, what we do is discipline. And I think, and I articulate this, that discipline is a failure of regulation. What an effective regulator does is it creates people that do not get, creates practitioners by working with them continuously from the time they enter into the profession through continuing professional development, through quality assurance and other activities so that they don't have complaints. And that's what should be our ultimate goal. The successful regulator should not have complaints because the profession behaves properly. So the whole process of developing a competence regime, working on the exams, a training program that will support that is a significant initiative. So we've previously approved a program that will start that work. Don Thompson is project managing it. We are using a firm out of Calgary called Principia that is doing some of the work, and we've already done some of the initial work in articulating competencies. But we're looking at how that unfolds over the next probably 4 years. This is likely probably close to a 4-year project. In terms of it could be done faster if we had more resources, but given our size, given our capacity, it will take likely 4 years before we see a complete transition of the exams into something which is more psychometrically defensible than our current process is, that separates technical knowledge and the testing of technical knowledge from the assessment of general knowledge. And that's crucial because certain types of exams are very good at testing one type of knowledge, and other approaches to exams are good for testing other types of knowledge. Let me be very clear. Technical knowledge is generally requires essay type answers. You should be able to explain what it is that you're doing. Whereas other types of general knowledge that's specific to the profession, lend themselves to multiple choice and true and false types of questions. And there's lots of study, lots of evidence that supports that. And many professions are moving in that direction. And so the advice is that we begin to develop that type of program. The corollary to that, or the other piece that has to fit into it, is what does the training look like? And how do we train new licensees? So very early on in our time together, we recognized that in Canada, there are no educational requirements for entry into this profession. Anybody can come in. There are people that have scientific backgrounds or engineering backgrounds that tend to gravitate more to this, but there are no requirements. That's not true in many countries. In many countries, you have to have a STEM degree in order to enter into the profession. So that's a question we should be asking. There are a variety of other questions like that that we should be asking. And that's the educational foundation. The other piece to it is what training is provided. Again, so in England, they have a university program. So you want to become a patent or trademark attorney in the United Kingdom, you have to attend a university and take that training. So those are some of the questions that this board or the successor board will need to deal with in due course. And that all fits into that next phase of planning that will start in this year, in 2022. The plan right now is that we will continue to develop the competencies, and we'll do that in conjunction with many members of the profession. We're about to launch a major recruitment of about 25 to 30 licensees across the country who will assist us with this work. And then there's a whole process for proving them, which is a wide survey of the profession in order to test them. And that will take place in 2022 towards the end of the year. The other piece that we'll start to do immediately is to do some better training of our Board of Examiners so that we can improve the quality of the exams. So you'll recall that for this year, we simply, as near as possible, adopted the CPO-IPIC exam program, and it's been very good. We've worked really hard with the wonderful members of the Board of Examiners, but it still needs, there's still lots of room for improvement. And the testing, the evaluation that we've done has shown us that. So what we've done is compared exams year over year over year, and we've been able to see that we're not testing the same things consistently year over year. So, and I don't want to go into the details of that, but it shows that there's room for significant improvement, and that will be part of the work that we start to do this year. So big project, huge financial implications, and that's one of the issues that the board will need to grapple with, is because as our numbers are relatively small, the costs per person are very high. But it is about kind of future focused, looking at how do we, one of the things we do is grow, one of the things we're committed to is looking at how we grow the profession. I think you grow the profession by creating a very clear set of expectations and standards for people who are coming into the profession. And you make it in a profession which is much more attractive because of that. Sorry, Ruth, you put your hand up and I didn't stop.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, go.
No problem.
Sorry,
I just
Ruth, I
wanted
didn't
to,
see you there.
yeah, no problem. I just wanted to sort of feather in on your point about the expense of all of this right now. Like, this is all really good, but expense per writer is going to be high. I think it's fair to say that our ultimate goal would be to issue examinations on a cost recovery type of basis. Yes. But we're not there yet. But that's a goal that we will aspire to as we do all of these other good things for the profession that you're talking about, Daryl, right?
Yeah. And we are trying to espouse a philosophy which is users pay for the cost of regulation. So we've tried to fix some of our application fees at a number which is commensurate with the work that is associated with doing that process. So those costs are not borne by the profession as a whole, but are borne by the users. It'll take us a couple more years before we can quantify that significantly. And here's another piece, and I'll just remind you of this. When we set the fees for the first year, we chose to bring new trainees, class 3 licensees, into the profession without charging a fee. My view was that if we charged a fee, we wouldn't get them. So we brought everybody in for free. I can't tell you the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours that Jen Slobodkin has spent reviewing those applications. So that's, in effect, we've given that time away. But on a go forward basis, we should be recouping those costs. We now know exactly what it takes to review an application. And what you gain in the swings, you lose in the roundabouts, but it should be a normalized cost
Right.
across all applications.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
So there are some other really key areas that one we've talked about previously, and we did talk about this in October, which is the code of conduct. So the code of conduct was developed by the department. It was enacted by the minister and delivered to us as a code. We've already seen some significant issues with it. None of them are life and death issues, but there are some, we've identified some gaps, some as a result of questions from the profession. That's the first piece, but the other piece that goes with this is education. How do we begin to develop an educational process that allows licensees to know about what their professional obligations are? And part of that's changing culture. That's a key piece to it, but also it is just pure knowledge. So we're going to ask a question in the annual licensee report. Have you read the code? That's a simple way of at least getting some people to look at it, but that's a longer term project that we will start thinking about with some assistance from Victoria and some others in terms of doing that work. We know that there are a couple of other areas under the Act that we will need to deal with. Continuing professional development and pro bono. I'm going to say that pro bono is of lesser significance, but CPD is a key piece that we'll need to look at. We're lucky in terms of one piece of timing. The Law Societies of Ontario and Alberta are undergoing major studies right now of what the continuing professional development requirements for the legal profession should be. And I think we'll be able to utilize that work as we begin to look at it. So it really is, the classic thinking is, how do you move away from bums in seats approach to CPD? In other words, people reporting hours as if they learn anything because they've spent so many hours doing something, or reading, watching a podcast, going to a conference. So it really is about getting people to be committed to their own professional development and how you do that. And as I said, both Ontario and Alberta are engaged in that process now. And so I think we have about a year. I suspect by this time next year, we'll have to start that discussion. So we'll see what that looks like. And you'll see I put that off, actually into the first quarter of 2023. And then there are a couple other pieces that are core to the way we said we wanted to operate: risk, outcomes. So I think we need some more time together before we're able to begin to look at outcomes. We have identified risk as something that will start with the enterprise risk. We put that on the terms of reference for the Risk and Audit Committee, and I think that's where we'll start that work once that committee is up and operating, and then begin to do some of the regulatory risk pieces. And finally, there's a stage 3, which I really am not going to talk about today because it's beyond the life. It's future looking, but with one exception, and I think this is something we probably do need to start to build more into our DNA, which is equity and diversity and truth and reconciliation. And we had a little bit of this discussion at our meeting in October. And I don't have anything specific yet, although I can tell you we're being very conscious in the selection process to, as Victoria referred to earlier, in terms of some of these principles. And we're starting to look at it. We'll be asking some questions in the annual licensee report to gain a better understanding of the profession. And then the other piece I note here is something that I refer to as CEO monitoring reports. So those become the means by which I, as CEO, report to you on operational issues that I believe the board needs to know about. So they don't take you into the operational discussion, but you need to know, as a responsible board, enough about operations to appreciate what we do, what our challenges are, what our successes are, what our failures are, things that are happening at the staff level. And so I put together, with the support of staff, just a program for the next year in terms of a number of monitoring reports that you'll begin to receive. And as you get the first one, you'll say, yes, this works, or this is what we need, and we'll begin to work with them. So that's the result of, in tabular form, of what we've done. Subject to the discussion that happens today, the operation of the plan is my responsibility. Then we'll put some narrative around it. So we'll turn it into somewhat more of a traditional business plan with some discussion that goes with the elements that begins to flesh out some of what I've just explained to you. Sorry for being so long-winded.
That was really informative, Daryl. Really, it really was, and it certainly paints a kind of a broad overview, broad brush of the many. There's much work to be done over the course of the next year or so. So let's just open it up for discussions if anyone wants to have any further comments on what's being proposed. I think it's quite clear and well laid out. I didn't really have anything to add, but Ruth, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I do. Thanks. So, Daryl, really, my comment was to your very last closing point, and that is that you've provided us with all of this information. You're now going to look for, I guess, an amount of direction, if you will. Like, do we think you're directionally correct in what you're doing here, and then that you would form a more, formalized business plan. Well, I guess what I would like to offer to you, Daryl, is I think this is absolutely excellent. And I think the this format that you provided to us, which is more sort of an actions checklist right now, that works well in a startup organization. As this organization matures, I expect that we would adopt a different format and a more formalized business plan. But I'm just telling you, this is good enough. You've got so much to do. Don't spend any time creating a more formalized document with narrative around it for me. You gave us this, you provided the narrative. I think you are directionally correct. I say go and do it. That's my view.
Okay. Yes, Doug, please.
There's one concern I have, and I just wanted to be fitted in someplace. And that is this. Let's say that you've got some trainee who has become qualified now, and he became qualified when he was working for a firm, and the firm had an infrastructure of to monitor deadlines, an infrastructure with respect to finances, an infrastructure with respect to precedents. So this person has been in an environment where he has the infrastructure that's supplied to him. Now the fellow either decides to leave and start his own practice, perhaps with others, or he's pushed out of the nest and he's forced to find a way to practice by himself. I want to know that if someone notifies the college that they're moving from a class 2 into starting their own practice, and this is their first office, that there's a checklist that they have to provide to us, that they have a deadline monitoring system, that they have a rudimentary precedent system, that they have certain accounting things, just a certain basic thing that it's protection of the public, purely. The fellow has been sheltered with all these things supplied. He now is going to open his own office. We want to make sure that he satisfies the college that he has at least a basic system to start his operations for. That's my only comment.
So I'll just say two things, Doug. One of the things we're looking at is what does a training program look like for for running a practice, I'll call it that. So you're in British Columbia. The Law Society has run the PLTC for now generations, and it's an outstanding program. The Prairie provinces and Nova Scotia participate in what's called CPLED, which is also a very high quality training program for general practice issues. The challenge we have right now is we couldn't do what you want us to do because the Act doesn't give us that authority. For reasons that none of us know, when the government decided that we were not going to be given authority to regulate firms, we lost a lot of ability to do the kind of things that I believe we should be able to do. And you've just identified them. So when I was at the Law Society in Nova Scotia, we were the first law society in the country to do that with new practice. We created a mandatory registration for new firms. And you had to demonstrate to the Law Society things like you knew how to operate a trust account. Here was your accounting system. Here's the diary system you were using. Here's the mail system we're using. I don't think we can do that. So but that doesn't mean to me we don't add it to the list of things we eventually might want to see in new legislation, because you cannot regulate unless you can effectively regulate the entity in which an agent provides services. Just can't happen. Sorry.
Okay.
So
Thank
Tom,
you.
let me add one key caveat at the end. We've worked really hard. The group of our stellar staff, and I'm quite pleased to call them a stellar staff because they are doing tremendous work at looking at our capacity. So that's a huge challenge. And we think we can do this. But it's like everything else. You have really good intentions, and then something comes along that's tsunami-like, or big snowstorm or pandemic-like that just throws you off your game. So that's the issue, and we'll monitor this to see if we can do it. We built the provision for some additional resources in the budget, and we're probably going to start to recruit for some additional resources that will help us move this work forward. But before I finish this, I do want to mention one thing, because we talked about it a lot in October, which was the fact that we were challenged on bilingualism. I ask each of you to go look at the college's website, and you will see a website that is about 90% bilingual. We're not 100%. We'll be 100% by the end of next week. But Donna, who has, as you know, joined us in Ottawa, has done a tremendous job with both our website developers in Victoria and our translation firm in Montreal to take every single word in the website and make sure it works. It's in both languages. What a tremendous accomplishment. So,
Excellent, je vous félicite.
Yeah.
Merci.
So great job. And so, but it's proven to me that and Jen has just gone through the first both sets of exams. The patent exam, well, is finished now, I guess. Is it, Jen? We've run 70 people through 4 exams this week. A few glitches, but no major tragedies. And the trademark exam finished and is being marked as we speak. So all of that is just, we are operating and doing our stuff. And so we're quite excited by this work because Jen says 126 individuals this week. So we are making great progress. And when I get a chance to begin to show you some of that, you'll see that we are fully operational.
Okay, great. Any other comments from the floor? No? Okay, Daryl, thank you very much. I think we're obviously fine with your report. I think the last, well, before we have one final thing that for you to present before we move on to information items.
Yeah,
And
just
that
very
is the
briefly, we are,
bylaws.
you've seen what the drafting instructions have looked like that we've sent off to the Department of Justice for the bylaws.
Yeah,
It's a process that we're getting acquainted with. We're doing some training. We've got a really excellent counsel to assist us. And we will start in the new year on that more comprehensive review of the bylaws that the board instructed that we undertake. But we are making progress.
okay, anything there for the board and inquiry? No? Any discussion on that? No? Okay, well, carry on. Carry on. And the next item, I think now we're going to be doing the financial statements. I guess that will be Sean, will it?
Sean is still with us. Yeah.
I think Sean's still with us. Sean, can you, can you give us the latest on the financial status of the college?
Am I here?
You are.
Okay.
You are here, yes.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So I didn't, with the short month, after we just approved the budget there at the last meeting, I didn't prepare a formal lengthy document because we'd already gone through it at the last month. Just a couple of the highlights are that we're in great position cash-wise. We should be well able to carry ourselves into the fee collection period. So probably like when the fees start coming in mid-February and into March, we don't have any cash issues. Like it doesn't look like we'll have to dip into the line of credit before that. So that is wonderful news. As we talked about before, the fees this year are slightly under what we had projected when we did the budget last year. We've seen a lot of, actually Andres and I looked at the number yesterday and we have 130 agents who had surrendered or had been suspended with their licenses that we had expected to renew in September. So that really is the crux of why we're seeing that we're under budget this year for revenue. But the good news is
so
that
these 130 people have just stopped practicing, have they?
Yes, either they've surrendered one or both of their licenses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And also, because we were a little bit delayed in coming into force and getting started up, we're also under budget with a lot of our expenses. So that has enabled us to stay in such a good positive cash flow for the year. And where we've built the budget for 2022, a number of those expenses have rolled forward, like some of the development of some of the programs. So things are going very well financially. And as Daryl said, we've engaged Grant Thornton to begin the external audit, and I've started to work with them on producing the interim work, like some of our processes, and I've given them some of the policies that we have and the legislative documents. So they're getting underway. So and with the plan being that, of course, we'll be able to make the March 31 reporting deadline to the minister. Okay. So there aren't too many highlights or lowlights in the financial statements right now. But if anybody did have any questions on them, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Any questions for Sean on the financial reports? Ruth, Karima?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. Just wanted to say, huge kudos to you, Sean. Honestly, you really have such a good handle on this, both you and Daryl, and the whole management team. You're just really committed to running a well-oiled, lean machine, and that's not easy to do, especially in a startup with so much work under
and so many variables,
Oh
that
my
could affect the bottom
gosh.
line.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I can just assure the board that from any individual conversations that I've had with Sean and Daryl, I feel like we're in really good hands. So thanks so much to you both.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sean, for that report. Glad to know that we're still still on the right side of the ledger.
And,
That's all I need to know for the present purposes. Okay. Thanks very much.
And if I could just add one more quick thing, at the very end of the finance portion, there's a memo to the board on the legislative compliance items. So yes. Daryl and I talked, and we're now to a point where we want to provide this at each meeting, just to say that we're on side with our regulatory and legislative compliances. We are a bit behind with filing of the 2020 tax return, but that was intentional because we didn't know with the coming into force and how things were going to go. So we, similar to the audit being for both 2020 and 2021, we wanted to do the same with the annual filings as well. So, and I've checked with the tax folks at my firm Baker Tilly, and they say that there's no penalties because we're treated as an NPO and there's no taxes owing. So we do have that. We have that covered.
Good. Okay. Good.
So Tom,
right.
if I can just
Ruth?
comment on that, this is really good. I appreciate the format that you're using here. I appreciate that you're providing this to the board. As a board, it is really important for us to receive this kind of attestation from our CFO and our CEO, because at the end of the day, if the corporate veil, if you will, is pierced and directors are personally liable if some of these things don't happen. So as directors, we want to be really sure that we're getting this sort of rigor in our attestation. So thanks to you, Sean and Daryl, for doing this.
Definitely.
Good point. Very good point, Ruth. Thank you. Okay, anything else? All right, I think that concludes the agenda. At least have I got that right? Yes. Correspondence from agent to CPO. That's the next item on the agenda.
Just an FYI item. There's no discussion.
Okay.
Can we ask a question on it though, even though there's no discussion?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So thank you. So this was super interesting, and for me, it really kind of helped to paint a picture of all of the things that we've theoretically been wrestling with. This person is dealing with them. This is impacting her world, and so it really painted a picture for me, and I really thank you for sharing that. At the end of this, of course, this person is asking you, Daryl, to contact her as soon as possible, and I'm just curious, were you able to do that and have a satisfactory conversation with her?
Yes, I've spoken to her,
okay.
And she specifically authorized this to be shared with the board.
Okay.
And so just it does show you the level of frustration,
wow,
and challenges that licensees have.
Yeah.
So I think one of the issues, we're far from dealing with it as a priority, but the whole process by which intellectual property rights are preserved, I suspect at some distant point will be an issue for the college.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing.
That's great. Sorry, Rick, but Doug's got a point.
Just so you understand, there's different times when I would receive in one of my offices correspondence intended for a completely different agent. And presumably they received my correspondence. So I would get hold of them and I'd say, Ruth, I received a letter that was intended for you. I will forward it to you. So you have CPO that does silly things. I shouldn't say that, that's unfair, but errors sometimes occur with CPO, but the person who bears the consequences of those errors are always the agents. It is a terrible situation sometimes. Plus, when something goes abandoned, if a certain amount of time goes by, it becomes irrevocably abandoned. It can't be brought back to life. And when it can't be brought back to life, it is the liability issue that falls directly on the shoulders of the agent. Now, whether he was responsible for mishandling mail or whether the mail was misdirected, the fact is the agent bears the brunt. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Well, there you go. That's That's life on the streets, folks. So do we have anything else that we want to raise on this last issue before we adjourn the public portion of the meeting? Okay. Great. Should we entertain a motion to adjourn the public portion of the meeting then? Doug? Jeff, Karima seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, thank you for those who are in attendance from members of the public. Thank you. We're now going to conclude the public portion of the board meeting and go in camera.
Have a nice
Thank you.
weekend to the
Yes.
staff. Thanks. We'll see you next week.